So good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Kula, the center of the universe in the middle of the Pacific, the island of Maui, somewhere in the world, somewhere in this galaxy, strange as it is. Welcome to this 3-day global virtual gathering. I don't know how else to say it. With the good people in this room, spiritually distant, socially distant, existentially distant, sexually connected. We are here together. Thank you for participating wherever you may be. We have a session this morning from 10 until noon here on day 1, and a second session from 1 to 3. And that will happen on Saturday and Sunday, July 3rd and 4th. And if I may, if you have questions anywhere around the world, don't hesitate. Many of you have written in. Send them direct messenger, by messenger itself, email, any topics at all that you would like to have me talk about. I'd be happy to try to weave them into my sharing here during this time. It's a precious opportunity, I dare say, to be alive. Complicated as it is, the inherent nature of being born into this world and forced to engage the complexities, the least of which are disease, aging, uncertainty, hatred, and some of the more violent forms of contention and complexity. It's hard to even utter the word genocide, ethnic cleansing, war, massacres, the idea of rape. I have a daughter. The idea that rape is a reality to this plane of existence is not something I ever want to become comfortable with. And so I don't have a rose-colored glasses on the nature of existence, but during these 3 days, I want to share with you some of the notes that I've taken, specifically this morning, on the meaning of world Dhamma. And also meditation. What is meditation to me? I have a phrase, the all-posture meditation. All times, all places, all contexts, all degrees of challenge, the 6 senses, the 3 streams of experience, thought, speech, and action, context inside, context outside. What is meditation? An awareness, a mindfulness. Mindfulness is a very commonly misused phrase of mine, and I've often said mindfulness is not enough. I want to repeat that straight out. Mindfulness is not enough. There are very talented American military personnel trained in mindfulness that assassinate good people, that drop drones on Middle Eastern countries. They're trained by Buddhist meditation teachers on wrong mindfulness. Let's be clear, even assassins can kill with present time presence. But is that right? Mindful intelligence, which is a very different concept than mindfulness alone, means that we are intelligently discerning of our presence. I'm looking through the scope of my denial at the projected enemy of the Iraqi, and mindful intelligence intervenes, if you will. Alan, why do you label her an enemy? You ask the question. Mindful intelligence also is a willingness to not only ask deep, hard questions repeatedly, because the impulse could be just to do what you're trained to do. You're indoctrinated into seeing that ethnicity as enemy, and you go, halt, halt, halt. You keep asking the question. So mindful intelligence is the repetition of an elegant insertion of deep inquiry, reasoning, independent thinking, self-analysis, and rooted in, let's call it, ethical courage, intelligent mindfulness, can't speak about it enough. Just want to get that off my chest straight out. This is not an ordinary mindfulness meditation gathering. Mindfulness, I have seen over nearly 5 decades, is not enough. It needs to be coupled with radical intelligence rooted in this very overlooked quality, I don't want to get too moralistic about it, called sila. Call it ethics. Very rarely do we find people willing to use the word dignity. Conscience. Pause, Alan. Conscience. What makes life livable for me is democracy, difficult and as complex as it is. However, we have within our democratic societies, fraught with evil, greed, privilege, and all kinds of other invenerating conditions that denigrate poverty, sex, so on and so forth. It is built upon the belief of all human beings, and I would like to include all non-human beings, equal in rights and protection of those rights, whether it be human, whether it be Somalian, whether it be Tibetan, whether it be the sea creatures, the bird creatures, the insects, and of course, natural life. So those 3 dimensions of democracy are rooted in a very little-known document that the late Eleanor Roosevelt, along with some good men and women around the time of the last war, the last big war, World War II, got together and decided to investigate with artists and scientists and thinkers and professors and servants of God in all religions, what are the fundamental truths that all human beings must abide by to create harmony and peace within civilization, to prevent. Can we commit our lives to the prevention of denigration of life? Ethics. Preventing ourselves from pulling back the trigger through the scope of denial and projection at enemy and saying, there's another way than blame and violence. Okay? Hang with me. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. 3 pages, 30 articles. Do you know them? May I invite you, look deep into the internet and find those 30 articles and put them right above your beloved Buddha, goddess, Tanka, Tantrika, your God, your devil, your savage, your lust, your hope, your conscience. Anoint conscience with the study of the attributes of civilized global existence. We're at the precipice of an environmental collapse, an economic collapse, the collapse of fiat, the collapse of decency, the collapse of dignity, the collapse of democracy. We're at the verge of a global takeover. Insidious as the information war is, that's in full assault now. We'll get into it over the days. Global totalitarianism is on the digital march, and it wants your mind. Be clear about it. Meditation is not enough. We need to radicalize, I feel, our lives. Allow me. Allow you to rise up in the cognitive, ethical adrenaline, right? Rise up in the power of your own lust for freedom, so that we become not only activists on behalf of the good, the true, and the beautiful, but we live and dedicate our lives reverentially to the manifestation of conscience in action. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Freedom to gather. We have a room full of people here. Spiritually distanced, nope, socially distanced, spiritually close. We are gathered in conscience to dignify our role in elevating the 30 Articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in essence, freedom to gather. Gathering without the fear of persecution in the country of Myanmar, known also as Burma, a country under assault, radically desecrating the good girls and boys for their dream of the love of education, of marriage, of the pursuit of an economic stability, of their art, their literature, their journalism, their movie making, their love making, their ability to give birth to life through the womb of safety is being denigrated and tortured at this very moment by a mind. A mind. Can we be passionate enough about the march of totalitarianism and the incredible activism inherent in the human heart to fight the forces of our own denigration, our own apathy? Let us write down words over the course of these 3 days that are touchstones that speak to you. Apathy, collusion, that epoxy that makes wrong sort of right without speaking up, just like the rise of the brown shirts in 1933, May 19th. Let's go back there, okay? We see a city square in Berlin burning with books. Helen Keller, blind as she was, they threw her into the fire along with lots of other intellectuals and radical philosophers. And they said, let's burn freedom. And the good boys and the girls of Germany in 40 cities simultaneously did book burnings. That was a long time before the rise of Mr. Hitler. How did that happen on our watch, in our era? Collusion with an evil ideology. The same thing today, more disguised, dressed in the oligarchs of Wall Street and in Silicon Valley and even in our own White House, be sure of it, in our own Senate. Because you are American or Canadian or Australian does not mean you are a lover of freedom anymore. We must fight back. This 3-day gathering is about taking it higher. It means learning the fine digital heart art of radical nonviolence and radical compassionate action, empowering conscience. Are you with me?
Yes.
Are you with me? Conscience, rooted in not something esoteric. We'll get into that on day 3. You know, we'll be doing our drugs soon, don't worry. But the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Let us study that document and feed it back to our government. Let us understand these 30 articles and manifest them as the oxygen of our conscience. That's what I mean about meditation. It's non-postural. Just as we breathe, in breath, out breath. Who gives a damn about you're aware of your breathing? Are you aware of your dignity? Are you aware of your conscience? Are you aware of your compassion? Are you aware of your love of life? Sacred soul means that I refuse to participate in the denigration of anything. Right? What does harmlessness mean? Ahimsa. Got all these tankas and Buddhas around here. What do they symbolize? The Buddha was said to have said, there's one thing I want to remove from my own psyche, my own source, my own substratum. Violence. I fear violence. You know something that's really good? Because when I'm fearful of violence, when I really feel it in my blood, in my soul, in my marrow, that means I will fear those people who want to violate me enough that I can lose it to protect myself and my interests. We must learn to fight back, if required, to fight fire with fire. But I'm not breathing guns and drones and nukes. However, don't fuck with me. Okay? I would say that to President Biden. I would certainly say that to the nuclear-powered bioweapon Xi Jinping of China, an atrocity of what he has done to his people. Look at what he has done to the Muslim Uyghurs of his own country. Could we lose it enough if that was our daughter, our brother, our sister? Imagine having a firewall around your own country, a firewall, conscripted, built in part by our beloved boys and girls right up the street in Silicon Valley. Money, 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 money. Profit, 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 profit. A digital firewall? What the hell is he thinking? I don't want my people to understand the capacity to think for themselves. Another one of the doctrines in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Freedom of thought, freedom of press. How many of you watched just recently in Hong Kong? Apple News, the biggest news outlet, one of the biggest in Asia, certainly the biggest in Hong Kong, hundreds of employees, 500 of Xi Jinping's running dogs with their guns and their walkie-talkies and their brainless, soulless conscience, no denigration. Redemption is possible. However, they need a high dose of acid, along with some really radical women to hold them into their divine feminine to start, and then a deep, deep plunge into some ayahuasca, especially to you, Xi Jinping. That's right. You know, but what you've done to the boys and girls in Hong Kong sucks. I hope this gets translated into your language of your denial, because I refuse to pull the trigger on an assassination to you, but I would vote to someone who would do it, because you're evil. And I believe in the sanctity of life. However, I'm looking for a non-violent response. Thus, this group, a global gathering of radicals around the world to rise up in our conscience. I'm talking democracy in action. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the foundation of our own country. It precedes. It expands our own Declaration of Independence. It's the blueprint for decency and dignity and conscience in action. Okay, that's an opening cold open, a big rant. Just had to get off my chest. Been worked up over the last couple of weeks. I haven't been around good people in quite a long time. Thank you for coming out. And listen, if we can't tell the truth, what are we doing? Collusion, complicity. Okay. So, point one, conscience. When I sit in meditation, when I walk in meditation, when I breathe in meditation, when I try to communicate in meditation, it's to situate this invisibility called heightened intelligent awareness. Let's just reinvent words for mindfulness. It's just so done, right? It's like McDonald's. Heightened, intelligent, curious awareness of the nature of something that's present in context. Okay? A very different dimension than flat screen mindfulness. Up a thought, judging. Way 2 days ago. It works. Potty training for dogs is cool, but once you know how to go into the right spot, you use the world as your latrine. Conscience. Can I invite you right now to participate in the fundamentals, the core of world Dharma, or the word Dhamma? Experiential. Words are words. They're interesting, but nothing can satisfy the oxygen to breathe. Our Dhamma, may I encourage you, must become so vital, so sacred, so important, that it really is the oxygen of our conscience. It keeps it active, nutritious, awakened, sensitive. The yoga of conscience is the meditation of an awareness of intelligent occupation with curiosity to this very important quality of conscience. What is conscience? A deep educational lifelong journey of understanding the difference between what's profitable, on a soul, heart, conscious level, and what is dangerous. What is valuable, what is not valuable. What is right in the million gradations of wrong. It is not an easy topic. When to hold them, when to walk. Letting go is just one dimension. You're walking down the forest path, you see a rock. Why pick it up to learn the art of letting go? Discernment, conscience, awareness. You know, I like to look at that rock exactly where it is. I think I'll respect nature. I'll walk around it. Or if it happens to be a serpent, you go pause. You make contact. You study the energies of the relational circumstance. You might even walk backwards. And in some cases, you may even run. Other cases, you may say, I see you, fear. And guess what? Get the fuck out of my way, dude. Okay? You're a bully. You got the wrong person you're bullying. So there's lots of dimensions to this second noble truth of the Buddha's teaching of grasping and letting go. It's so pedantic to let go, let go. There's so many things that we must cling to with all of our might. If someone were to attack my daughter and I'm practicing letting go, are you full of shit, Alan? You would do everything in your might. Pause. Imagine if you were really a compassionate being and you saw all beings as your daughter. Wow, that's overwhelming. You being caring for all beings rather than a platitude as my family? Well, when I talk about Dharma principles and states of consciousness, it's in reality to the humanness of where we see ourselves coming back to point two, experiential engagement. I can't satisfy enough of direct experience. Learning to respect the subtleties and the nuances of how you hear, feel, taste, touch, and think. Okay, I'm going to give a couple of more little points here, and then I'm going to open it up in this early morning session with the people here that are local. If there's any questions, I wish I had a chance to offer questions to you online. That'll come down the road. But point 3 of World Dharma, let me just conclude with a very, very important point. This was taught to me by my teacher, the late Sayadaw Mahasi Sayadaw. In this monastery, he said, we cultivate the Dhamma. We employ the timeless qualities of consciousness that do two things. Release one's own consciousness from conflict. Make it a lifelong journey. However, it's a knowable transformational art. Dhamma is a knowable, transformational, experiential, personally applied art to overcoming self-generated dukkha or suffering or conflict or stress. I dare say the word stress because it's so marginalized. Anxiety is so marginalized today. Trauma is so commodified today. I'm not denouncing the merchants of trauma, but sort of am. But, and I'm going to get into this as the day goes on, beautifying anxiety, beautifying addiction, transforming the language of how we hold ourselves in contempt is the fine art of a mindful intelligence that isn't just being aware of something. We're learning to see how words shape our own emotional body. Let me invite you here. Reinvent your language. My teachers would often say, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? I know Dharma teachers who use the same notes that they had 40 years ago, give the same talks, and they lost the meaning of their words. You know why I know that? Because I was one of them. It became a gig until I began to see that I was a dogmatic evangelist. And all of a sudden, I was more concerned with the amount of donations, the amount of attendance, and the frequency of retreats, and the book contracts, the likes, the swipes, the various things that come with all of those various accoutrements of denial and greed and fear and delusion. What I'm saying here is that it's human. It's human to be human. And what we're doing here is to beautify our interiority and therefore reinvent the words that speak to our heart. So may I be really inviting of you to really look carefully, and I would write them down. What are, say, maybe 5 or 10 or 15 of the emotional words that you used to describe your own identity? Why am I saying this? And I'm going to pause here. I don't know who this girl is behind me, but she's sort of cool. There's a Buddha next to him. It's like, but if I had my tanka, I would put my fingerprint up there. And why would I say that? Because a fingerprint, as I understand it, is unique. And what I mean by the Dhamma here, as my teachers employed and told me and helped me understand, is that no two of us will do the Dhamma the same. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I got to belong to the Sangha of spiritual correctness according to how people do it here in Kula. Otherwise, I'm a Zen student and you're a Tibetan student, you're a Vipassana student, you're a Western teacher. Everyone does it differently. Imagine that. Imagine something so obvious that the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you hold hands, the way you love, the way you meditate, the way you fear, the way you cry, the way you orgasm, the way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you wake up, the way you dream. There'll be patterns, but deep in there is the unpatterning of conformity, uniqueness. No two of us will do it alike. And so when people ask me about the beauty of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's about non-conformity in respect to the rights of others. Totalitarianism is radical conformity to the greed, the delusion of generally one guy called a dictator. So we got to be very careful not to impose dictator on the Buddha. Because dogma is the running dog of dictatorship and totalitarianism and ideology and fundamentalism. And the death of freedom is orthodoxy. So be very, very watchful of the traps and the shadows, the convulsions of all of these things. Yes, over the course of the next 5 sessions, today from 1 to 3, tomorrow 10 to 12, 1 to 3, and the same on Sunday, I'll be repeating a lot of these things. So don't fear that you're going to lose them. Of course, it's placed as long as Facebook allows this to stay up on board. You can watch it. May I encourage you to invite your friends. This is a chance for us to commune and go deeper and to hang out in this very rare moment on planet Earth where, as I conclude the first segment of this first session, not the total of the session, we got to believe in something, okay? And I'm saying, go to the core of your own heart, your own soul, your own mind, your own conscience. Abide there and empower the breathtaking beauty of your uniqueness. I say, look into the mirror of your own awakening and say, I love you. I want to know you. I want to learn from every element of you that I've denigrated, I've shamed, I'm fearful of. Even the face of struggle and trauma, anxiety and stress and worry and doubt and restlessness and greed and delusion. How many of you are addicted to something? I'm going to get really down with the issue of addiction because I've been working with it now for almost my whole life. And I used to joke back on the day when I could do theater that I was more addicted simultaneously to more things at the same time than anyone I'd ever met, including breath watching. I was a meditative addict. I OCD'd on mindfulness. It can be done. Addictions and compulsions do not care of the object, whether it be money, sex, alcohol, nicotine, masturbation, denial, celibacy, ideology, God worship, God denial. It's all about the relationship and the study of the emotionality of the word addiction. May I invite you, if any of you are out there dealing with things that you call addictions, I don't even want to talk about those in recovery. It's just not my thing. I'm not looking at my life in recovery. I'm recovering my beauty by living forthright into the virgin awakening of enlightenment, but I'm not in recovery from something I did when I was a kid or a teenager or a young adult. Beautify is the word, beautify. We learned in the monastery how to beautify everything that you vilified. The word bhavana is the beautification of consciousness. So as I conclude, write down the things that you feel ashamed of, those sacred secrets that you won't even tell your therapist, that you wouldn't even give the shaman on a high dose of ayahuasca. You would not even purge it under oath. You'd rather take all of your cryptocurrency and give it away rather than reveal that sacred secret, whatever it is. Don't be afraid. Don't tell anyone, but do tell yourself, and stop cringing with contraction around it as being wrong. Every one of us have the right to redemption. Every one of us have the core and the soul of a Judas. Every one of us may encounter the grossest expression of evil unless we're mindfully aware of the deeper recesses of those configurations of our own mind. I'm not free of Xi Jinping in my own heart. I must be vigilant. So all I'm saying here, the best way to be vigilant is to beautify what we're afraid of, beautify what we're ashamed of, and learn the fine art of embodying dignified conscience. If you're looking for meditation instruction, whatever you do, walk with your shoulders back, your fucking head up. I sometimes look at my hands and, I go, fuck. If these things were ever taken from me and I got them back, I've said this so many times, but I'll never stop saying it, I would so appreciate that I had hands, okay? That you have consciousness, Alan. My best friend, I've said it many times, he died of early onset Alzheimer's. He lost cognitive functioning. It's causal. It's conditioned. It's conditioned by oxygen and blood and the using of it. Conscience is the nutrient of consciousness. Dignity is the soul of conscience. And the virtues that beautify dignity and conscience, what I call states of mind. That's bhavana. That's meditation. So wherever we walk and talk and sit and write and make love and cook and listen, listen well to your conscience and don't defy it. And listen to the conscience of another person and respect it. But when we learn to meditate, occupy your dignity and occupy your conscience. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in today. I don't know what the time is, but I'm feeling it, and I hope you're feeling it. And I'm going to just take a pause here to drink a little bit of water, chill, have a little bit of tea, tune in, invite your friends. And those of you who are here today, thank you for coming out. If there's things that you want to talk about, this is a time to kind of go in and think about them and just deliver them in somewhat of a succinct way. And I'll repeat them, and then we'll just dive into the remainder of this first session here from the middle of the universe in Kula on Maui in Hawaii, something called planet Earth. So, So do you have anything that you would like to ask or address? Feel free to just tell me what it is. Okay. Any of you out there, wherever you may be, questions that you may have, happy to answer them. Just DM, messenger me, and I'll integrate them. Let me continue on with this first session. Mahasi Sayadaw and I are talking. You are now a monk. You're in this monastery, this sacred yekta. Here we encounter and practice the Dhamma. And I want to outline the different touch points within that Dhamma that for me transcend dogma and Buddhism. It's a distillation of timeless principles that I call world Dharma, beyond religion and orthodoxy and tradition. I have high regard for these things, but it's not who I am today. I want just the 2.0 or the 3.0. I don't want to use a technological analogy here, but I want essence. What is the cognitive transformational essence? Okay? And Dhamma, twofold. Overcoming what? Greed, anger, and delusion. Pause. I once in Bali spent 5 months studying every synonym and antonym that I could find in the dictionaries I had available to greed, anger, and delusion. And their opposites. Generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. 6 attributes of consciousness. The Dhamma, as I understand it, is the direct experiential engagement to overcome lobha, dosa, moha, greed, anger, and delusion, and all the thousands of gradations of those 3 roots. Meditation is the awareness, and Dhamma literacy is an individual who is literate with the states, the textures of consciousness. They know their attributes, they know their manifestations, they know their feeling bodies, they know their characteristics, they know what is known as their disguises. For example, we all love compassion, the ability to resonate with the suffering of another, empathize, but just pure empathy is not enough. Compassion is an action, very much like generosity is an action, that actually doesn't rest in the idea of wanting to give something. It actually fulfills the entire spectrum from thought to intention to the delivery of the food. Compassion is an action. Aung San Suu Kyi told me in 1995, she made it up, metta is fantasy love if it is just thought. Cool as it is, but she coined the phrase, metta in action. That was her phrase. Compassion in action, her phrase. Conscience in action, her phrase. Generosity in action, her phrase. Democracy in action, her phrase. Freedom in action, her phrase. Revolution in action, an action-oriented Dhamma. And so the near enemy of compassion is what's known as soka, or sorrow. It feels very much the same. You empathize with someone's pain, but you contract rather than open. You often are prevented from actions that are actually efficacious to the overcoming of the other person's suffering. You can collude when you're driven by sorrow. With compassion, you're curious at the way to uproot, uplift the other person's struggle through not just one action, but imagine dedicating a period of time to compassionate embrace, contextual embrace, cultural, community, national, collective, compassionate embrace. Another way to look at activism. So we creatively look at ways to uplift the status of others, family, friend, community. So here we're looking at states of consciousness in terms of their characteristics, their shadows, their functions, and then equally, the second dimension of Dhamma is the expansion into beautiful states of mind. I can't say enough about this. I know it sounds a little bit weird to hear the word beautiful states of mind, but for those of you who are more intellectually inclined, get used to it. Beautiful states of mind are beautiful. They're actually called in Buddhist psychology Sobhana Cetasika. Mahasi Sayadaw's name, which very few people understand or know, his name was U Sobhana. Beautiful states of consciousness. May I invite you, rather than learning Buddhist psychology, may I invite you during this 3-day gathering, document the evidence of your own awakening. Stop buying Dharma books, my own included. Write your own. Anoint your life with your own unique Dhamma path. Walk and tread lightly through your own investigation of looking through the lens of denial and projection at the enemy called you. Put down everything and invite you into the respect of uniqueness and develop your own journey of awakening and looking for causal relatedness within maps. But don't. You're the one who has to do the walking, the talking, the moving, the loving, the sleeping, the meditating. Uniqueness of style. I'll speak more about aesthetics and style soon. But here, the beautification of consciousness. I stopped meditating, although I use the word out of habit. I'd like to be more vigilant to cease using it altogether. I'd rather see my life as an expression of my Dhamma, the Dharma life, the beautification of consciousness in context. All dimensions, all postures, all times, all states, all degrees of challenge. All postures, all times, all states, all conditions, all degrees of challenge. I'm empowering the beautification, the bhavanification, the beautification of consciousness. Okay, pause. Very important point that I want to share right now. Deficit psychology. Pathological presence. Grave dig Dharma. Wounded child narratives. They're dysfunctional by the very nature of them. May I invite you, drop it. Drop it. One of the beauties of eternity, infinity, and no first beginning is that there's no way to look back to correct present time presence. Ultimately, reflection is relative. You think you've got a trauma from the age of 14? Try being psychic and seeing multiple lifetimes of successive traumas that are far worse than that trauma. Reflection is powerful, but please do not think of yourself as healed because you've gone back. Rather, invite reflection, but my point here is what's called the positive transformational model of presence. I've said this for decades. I want to say it again, never get used to saying it. Consciousness is a flower. This came right out of the Buddhist teachings. Consciousness is beautified based upon the relaxation of the forces of darkness. We don't examine the darkness between the petals to support the opening of the flower. No amount of investigation of darkness will overcome that. Yes, there's some wisdom in seeing that. But really, all of a sudden you go, okay, I see you, darkness, but it's natural to the nature. Are you with me? The flower grows in conditions of soil. What is your soil? What is the ground of your growth? Know that. Some people choose settings and people and places that are very different. The ground of what are the nutrients within our soil? Food, diet, behaviors. What are those nurturing behaviors? What is your light? Attribute to your light qualities of behavior, thought, and interrelationship that support your awakening. Complicity with addictions are often supporting your closure. I'm not denigrating them, but know the difference between awakening and expanding and contraction and darkening. So the beautification of consciousness here, what are the qualities of life for you that support your opening? And this is where I go into, you don't overcome addictions, you displace them. I know so many people who are counting the second on how many years they haven't had a glass of alcohol. 32 years, 2 months, 3 hours, 36 minutes, 27 seconds, and my Apple Watch that I'm killing the future of the world with is, I'm still in recovery. I haven't had a glass of alcohol now in second. I mean, I'm playing it out, obviously. No offense to you in recovery. But it's a bold move to not define yourself by what you don't do. Fucking empower your rad, girl. Go into your goddess, girl. Go into your God guy. Go into your radical, I could break a bone in this next move of leaping from ordinary culturally sanctioned behaviors and clubs and communities and sanghas, and just break out into what is your untapped creativity. And then all of a sudden you found lust again, you found passion again, you found a reason to be, that raison d'etre. So there's something to be said for the positive transformational model. What time is it, by the way?
Now, 11:03.
11:03?
Yeah.
We okay?
Great.
Okay.
Someone said it wasn't coming in live, but
Say again?
they said they were looking for it live and they...
Oh, it's live. There's lots of people on live.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no faking my phone.
Perfect.
No, this has been 4 years and counting every day. I know when it's live and when it's not live. So let me continue with World Dharma and the step-by-step, dive into a non-pedantic, non-Buddhist, non-dogmatic, for me personal, grounding in the word Dhamma or Dharma. And as I understand it, the word Dharma is like the oldest word in the world for the meaning of freedom, lawful freedom. It's a deep epistemological, existential vibration, if you will, in the collective consciousness that we have words like Dharma. It's like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on a more sub-existential level of what defines psyche, consciousness, source, memory, and whatever the word is that speaks before pre-source. Because when we speak about infinity and timelessness and non-beginning, we're really looking at a world and a consciousness without absolute north, south, and future center point. And when you throw in the Buddhist concept of anatta, non-centrality, we have to deal with more modern terms like, I dare even use these words because I don't know them sufficiently enough to know their deeper meaning, but a kind of holographic circumstance in which it bleeds, it oozes, it kills, it's raped, it dies, it cries, it gives birth. I mean, it's like configurations of energy that congeal around this psychic, nuministic thing called consciousness. And so here this conscious field for me is the next dimension is, what's the next dimension that I want to speak to? Overcoming, expanding, experiential. I could say a lot about that. People tend to say that those who use words that are intellectual, words are not just words. You can have a beautiful rapport with someone And in 5 minutes, words misinterpreted through a source, but believed to be the truth of what's being said because of their unrecognized projection, a relationship breaks in minutes. It happens all over the world. Go to family court. Words are powerful, and there are few people that employ them consciously. It's a projection fest out here. At times it's a picnic, but by and large it's a shooting range with your own denied projection. And it's annoying. Grow up. Take control of your mind. Go into a retreat. Go into psychotherapy. Go into psychedelic therapy. Do something to reclaim your projection, man. Go into your heart, right? Man to man. Grow up. Take it off of you. Take it off of me. Take it off of the world. This type of, this employment of consciousness, you know, let me say it this way. The next dimension would be, I'm so down with this all time, all place, all state, all context, all degrees of complexity. You want to put yourself into a spiritual full Nelson with your Dharma so that you don't play the game of what South Africa did with apartheid within your Dharma world. Hierarchy sucks. Teachers who you label themselves as teachers suck. Hear me, especially if you're a Westerner. Rather, the art of just simply revealing where you hang and let people live in the atmosphere of that open sharing. Take what's valuable, leave the rest behind. Don't commodify it and hierarchical, just drop it. How many of us have lived and walked a lie to understand more of the authenticity of a non-teaching role in terms of the beauty of Dhamma? Simply walk your walk, walk your talk, and let, as Gandhi said, your life be your message. And if there are questions, reveal the evidence through your own insights. I think one of the most overlooked questions, not to get off on a rant here, but why not, that are not often asked is like, do you lie, Venerable Sir? Look at all the predation within the Buddhist scene alone. Trungpa Rinpoche, Sipan, his son, Urgen Telson, his appointed heir, Sogyal Rinpoche. Look at the Catholic Church. Thousands upon thousands of priests that lived and thrived in the shadow of orifice hunting, of boys and girls in the name of God and Jesus and Christ, just living out of repressed fantasy of domination. Let me purge you of your sins, bend over. I mean, hello? Where does that come from? Dogma, orthodoxy, blind ritual, totalitarianism within religion, within politics. Hello, hi, I'm Joseph Biden. I got into office based upon a lie, and I don't even know my name anymore. No offense if you're offended. But America is at the breaking point of trust. How do we break the coma of these collusions? So I think we really, really need to come out of all these hierarchical roles, and I want to state it right off in the beginning. You know, just cut me right off, unlike me, unfollow me. Men should bow out of roles of power. If you're a plant medicine guru, if you're a psychotherapist, if you're a Dharma teacher, if you're a meditation teacher, if you're a politician, if you're a priest, certainly if you're a predator, and certainly if you're a pedophile, back down. I'm not saying women don't get it right, but guess what? Men got it wrong. The world as it is right now is uninhabitable. And every one of us have a foot pedal on denial and consumption and the fetishism of blind consumerism. But then again, hello, how to be an activist today? bar men from power. And when they do get into any role whatsoever, they should be cross-checked with women holding vigil around them, standing naked in a high dose of the psychedelic to see if their hull is cracked. And then, if they pass that particular, inspection, they should be sent for a year to a refugee camp, unanointed with their suit or their passports, and to serve where American carnage and bombs drop unknowingly all the stock options that make them wealthy. It's wrong. Saying things that are subversive like this and you react, it's because you're complicit with evil. And unless we learn the high art of overcoming these things, we are doomed, like Greta Thunberg addressing on September 9th, 2019, 193 nations in the civilized world. Let it be known again, we're with you, Greta. And we're with you, every boy and girl in the world who are connecting the dots to all of us on the foot pedal of the mass extinction. I want no more of your fairy tales of endless economic growth. I want no more of your bullshit fantasies of money, 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 power, and privilege. I mean, this video will soon be dead. All of us on this planet will soon be dead, and there'll be a great astrophysical silence when the Earth is engulfed by Mother Sun, no more than 100 to 200 million years from now, when her great flames incinerate the very place that we sit today. And all that's left is a legacy of who we've been, somewhere in this great invisibility. And yet, life formed, right? We're investing in long-term consciousness. And the Dhamma, to me, is the greatest gift that the human mind can acquire in this great infinity called samsara. All times, all postures, all states, all degrees of complexity, 3 streams of experience: thought, speech, action. Let me continue with a classic story attributed to the Buddha of his son, one of my favorites. His son was named Rahula, and the Buddha was said to have taught his son a teaching that encompasses just about everything that we could ever want to know about the Dhamma. He said to his son, employ your awareness and see your own mind, speech, and action. And this is my language, a multidimensional, intersubjective mirror. The mirror here is that it sees things pretty cleanly as it is, and yet consciousness filters interpretations. He's employing his son through the 3 streams of how we engage the world and how we engage ourselves. Thought, speech, and action. Employ the power of a multidimensional, intersubjective, mirror-like quality of felt reality called mindful intelligence. And he said to his son, when you think and you feel in your intuitive wisdom that your thought is filtered with greed, anger, and delusion, son, cease it on the spot. It is not profitable to you or others. Guard that thought door. So cool. When you are speaking and you sense with your multidimensional, intersubjective, mirroring-like quality of awareness that speech is about to be flavored or toxified with greed, anger, and delusion, don't say it. The power of restraint. Cool. And when you are about to do something through your body, and you sense with that intersubjective mirror-like quality of discerning inquiry and awareness, that it's rooted in lobha, dosa, moha, greed, anger, and delusion, and all the nuances of that. Rahula, hey dude, my son, why bother when it will result in your own demise, your own contraction, your own... Haven't we come to terms at times with having done said and thought things only to later reflect upon them and regret them. I have met people in monasteries who've killed people. And in their meditation, after a month or even longer, that buried memory field began to uncongeal from denial in the subconscious. And it began to surface. We would look at this young man in a monk's robe, and the teacher would be soft and gentle and wait until is there something you'd like to share? And he eventually shared. Years back, I killed someone, and it's now coming to surface. And then this man, he was a great meditator, but all of a sudden he broke down over the course of the next few days. And you can feel the convulsions of him coming to terms with his conscience and having done something wrong. But the teacher held space for him. The guide held space. Then he asked him, Venerable Sir, what would you like to do with your awakening? I would like to disrobe, sir, and go back to the family of the village where I killed this person and atone for my transgression. We never saw him again. I can't say that consciousness is self-corrective, but conscience itself, employed wisely, seems to allow us to understand before we regret and transgress, to prevent those thoughts, speech, and actions from happening. Thus the teaching to Rahula, the Buddha's son. Before these things arise, son, and you know it, restrain yourself from those actions, those thoughts and speech. Then he said to Rahula, if when you're thinking, if when you're speaking, if when you're acting, and you feel in that thought, speech, action stream, and greed feels good a lot of the time, come on. Anger, it's like, hey man, you motherfucker, what did you do that for, you know? Road rage, heart rage, sex rage, war rage, porno rage. People are down with rage as like, really a high virtue. But later it's like, if you have it directed at you, and you're in a prison cell and being tortured, you're going, oh God, this is disgusting. This is unthinkable violence. And you know that greed, anger, and delusion are not to be cultivated, but to be overcome. And so if you know that you're thinking and speaking and acting from greed, anger, and delusion, Rahula, stop on the spot. And when you have finished your thought, your action and speech, whether it be a minute, a day, a month, or a year, and you reflect upon those actions and thoughts and speech, and they were rooted in greed, anger, and delusion, commit yourself, son, to non-repetition of those thoughts, speech, and actions. It's the study of SOMs, SOC, study of states of consciousness. It's Dhamma literacy. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Lobha, Dosa, Moha, and all gradations that I see and feel and mindfully know. We must become more and more fluent. Imagine in the White House right now, they took up something post-mindfulness. They took up embodied wisdom, which meant a commitment to overcoming our own interior accumulations of greed, anger, and delusion. And he said to his son, when you see, Rahula, your thought, speech, and action, that it's rooted in love, kindness, generosity, compassion, patience, determination, wisdom, freedom, goodwill. Do it, son. Do it and do it again and again and again through thinking, speech, and action. That's the Dhamma, Rahula. That's all. Employ your being as a multidimensional, intersubjective mirror of discernment and awakening and ethical courage and spiritual courage. And that's what I call mindful intelligence. I want to thank you all for tuning in. We still have some time here. There'll be some, in the next session, meditation. We're actually going to sit and in a very gentle way offer how I meditate so that you can hear, if you so are interested, and compare it, evolve it, or leave behind the way that you meditate. But I personally do all that I can to, as much as I rail upon sitting as a potential obstacle to a more full Dhamma life, although I truly treasure the intensive retreat modality, which is very different than just sitting. But we're going to be doing a little bit of sitting at the beginning of the next period at 1 o'clock. So if you want to be a part of that, please join in, and I'm going to offer some very specific instructions about that. But as we proceed here at this time, Mahasi Sayadaw, in his sharing about the meaning of Dhamma to me, he said, here at this yekta, this monastery, which is really a very defining quality of the system of meditation that the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw brought forth based upon what he said were the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know. He was a master of the pedagogy as well as the experience. Is the, how should I put it? The power of the all posture presence. If those of you who've been in monasteries in the Mahasi tradition, or any of the traditions of the Buddha that empower all postures at all times in all contexts, in the monastery we practiced meditation with a schedule that had sitting and walking meditation. And I don't mean just equal to sitting and walking. I mean high priority placement on everything in between sitting and walking. To the point where I saw people, and I always encouraged myself, that your meditation practice, Agathara, which was my monk's name, is about everything other than sitting. Which is, really? But I like sitting so much. I like the concentration that comes from my sitting practice. It's only when I'm sitting, Venerable Sir, that there's any chance that I'll progress upon the classical evolution of Vipassana, correct? They never really answered questions directly, except, as I said, please empower everything beyond your sitting and your walking meditation as even a higher priority than sitting. In retrospect, you can see how people become somewhat addicted, attached to composure, to focus, to timelessness, to high absorption states, to the enthrallment with insight. It's there. I'm so fucking insightful, it's unthinkable. And, really spacious freedom, all-inclusive freedom to more dimensions of complexity, as Jesus said, how easy it is to love those who love you. Even the tax collectors can do as such. How easy it is to be insightful meditator. As a nun or a monk or a layman in a meditation center, then I'm an absolute, addictive, dogmatic, asshole teacher when I leave. The unintegrated, as John Wellwood put it some years back, although I expand upon it and I agree to some extent, the bypassing modality. Meditation was in many ways meant to bypass. But in modern world, why have any time off from the possibility of self-actualization? So high frequency states are not necessarily wise states. Oh, I'm not addicted to 500 micrograms of LSD. I just do it like every 13 seconds. Oh, ayahuasca, you can't be addicted to it. Although how long have you been doing it? 30 years now. How long have you been meditating? Let me check my bio. I haven't updated it yet. 42 years, 3 months, and 22 seconds. When were you enlightened? 42 years and 3 months ago. And you've been living in the glow of that ever since? Oh, yeah. It's like disconnect Dharma. But I think, and I'm not a great example of this, but I try, don't identify with the sitting or the walking as priority. Mahasi Sayadaw, what else do you do in the day? Standing. Cool. Lying down. 3 years ago, and ever more the last year, and even more the last 3 or 4 months, I say this with humility, I don't longer go to sleep. I don't go to bed anymore. It's an old narrative. As maybe you define your life as a yogi, I do. I meditate now throughout the night, and within that process, yes, I sleep. But I lie down against the wall in a reclining posture with my hands on my chest, on my heart these days, in breath, out breath. Neither wish to live nor fear dying. Always cutting it back to the expanding sacred. Why have time off from your beauty, your evolution, your awakening? Yes, it sounds pedantic, it sounds excessive. Why not be excessive in the Dhamma? Why not be excessive in liberating our freedom? Why not be inclusive to all parts of life? Birth, aging, dying, mortality, disease, although the body is decaying. Seda U Pandita would often encourage, do not let your mind be affected by it. Do not place your freedom in death and life. All times, all postures, all states, standing, sitting, walking, reclining. The fifth posture. For those of you who have pain, whether it's emotional or physical pain, you'll love this. Standing, walking, lying down, something like that. Sitting. What else do I do? It's called everything in between all four. Whoa, 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 whoa. I used to see people reach for their doorknob and take 3 hours. That's a monastery in the deep experiential, rare engagement to go as deep into the sensitivity. They're not being slow. Their mind now, there's been a time dilation. They have this in quantum physics. Time travel, a time dilation. I mean, I don't know Einsteinian theories well, but I think the theory of relativity deals with time dilation. And so your mind engagementfulness gets so radiant that it transcends tick-tock, 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 clock, clock, just like we're in an airplane. And there you are reading a book on being present, and you decide to go to the urinal or the washroom, and you mindfully walk back, slowly being aware of your body. Meanwhile, we're disconnected from the fact that we're going 600 miles an hour around a planet moving 25,000 miles an hour in circumference, going some hundreds of thousands of miles an hour around the sun, and a sun in a galaxy. These relative dimensions of speed and space. The same thing with a meditator reaching for a doorknob. Actualization to a deeper dimension of timelessness in time. And you go, oh my God, universes awaken. Many of you know that meditation done well, leads to psychic intuitive phenomenology. It's not airy-fairy. It's not, something out of, you know, all those books that one might deem as unessential. But consciousness is clearly a spectrum of dimensions, radiance, and dimensionality. And meditation allows us more sensitivity to feel more nuances, more identities, more releases of fixations, and all postures, all times. And so for those of you who really do struggle sometimes with developing a daily meditation practice, I say this with fairness, that although I may sit for 5, 10, 30 minutes or an hour, I will not say every day, but the less I do, the better. Why do I say that? Because I continue to emphasize other postures than the 4 main postures. Frankly, I love meditatively engaging in the evening a glass of wine. I do it really well. And if you're in my life and you want to hang some time, we can meditatively drink the sacrament. When I low dose, medium dose, don't do high dose too much anymore, but when I do that, whoa, ho, ho, monastic meditative nuance. I just love so if you can slow down and take yourself out of right and wrong. I sat today for 10 minutes, or I sat today for 30 seconds. I'm no longer listening to guided meditations. I'm overcoming that habit of needing to have someone talk to me in sweet talk in order for me to feel better about myself, to go about my busy day doing the same old things all the time. Whoa, the way you cook. Try the way you touch yourself, to self-pleasure yourself. Do it with unthinkable presence without the need to come. Take speed out of who you are. That was one of the greatest meditation instructions I ever got from Mahasi Sayadaw. Take the speed out of presence. Yes, there's a time to go fast. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. I went down to Whole Foods yesterday, driving one of the first times in a long time, hurtling through the fucking speed belt at 45 miles an hour, and felt like I was like on a rocket ship of hell, consuming the future of life with fossil fuels and denial, to go into Whole Foods with all these foods that were being shipped in and flown in, every goddamn thing except the meat. And probably that too is being, I'm going like, holy shit, Greta, we are doomed here in the middle of the Pacific with all this stuff. What am I thinking? And I slowed down when I was in Whole Foods and just felt, and quite frankly, I felt like I was on a high dose of acid there. It took everything to pull myself, to pull it together, to buy what I needed to buy, to get into the car, to come back to this little sacred land, this little temple, and to breathe again in the fidelity of nature. So when I'm speaking about, anointing our lives with meditation in between the 4 great postures, not to do what we do only meditatively, but to reinvent the 5th dimension of our posture and our behavior. When's the last time you actually went out into the wilderness? When is the last time that you actually didn't go to the pool to swim alone, but to float? When's the last time you took purging out of your plant medicine and did it as sacred interconnectivity to something other than you? That you went to nature and listened to the butterflies, to the light, to the patterns of the spectrum within light, to the sound of a bird. Sometimes when I was in the city, I'd go out of my home where I was gifted, and the automation, the electrification of of urban Western life and Eastern life too. I don't know about you, but I felt really just conscripted almost as a foot soldier of this homicidal economy, as it's been called. And I can feel it in my body and my blood. I'm here in nature right now, and I feel tremendously relaxed a lot of the time. So when I'm talking about meditation, choose environments in which to further the direction, the intimacy of your own awakening. Sitting, walking, standing, reclining, everything in between. Let me say a few words about eating meditation, because we do it every day. I don't know about you, but it's easy to eat out of habit, to state the obvious. So many people eat in order to feel a sensation, primarily first in consciousness, and secondly, and coupled very intimately with consciousness within their abdomen. They eat until they're full. And often that fullness is far beyond the need for health, vitality, and I would call it Dhamma vitality. And so taking the speed every now and again, and I don't want to accommodate the thrill or the haste of time. It's up to you to do what you need to do to moderate your time and your space and how much you give over to living as a vehicle for freedom. But eating, there's something very, very precious about not only choosing what we buy and where it comes from, and I dare even talk about the footprint, but how we prepare it. It's so easy to just move through life. Next thing you know, I mean, I don't know about you, but we're on the verge of death. And it's like, oh, it's over. 50 years have gone by since you left LA to become a monk. And now you're 70 years old and you go like, what, man? Where did it go, right? The old person's story. Where did it go? Because you were in the wave of unrecognizable habit, prediction, normalcy, the normalization of the culture, the normalization of capitalism, the commodification and the normalization of control, the normalization of the subjugation of passion and art. And I'm going to get into the artistry of things today and tomorrow as well. What does it mean to tune into the untapped nature of my unbridled voice as vehicle for transformation and conscience and dignity, a new meditative expression called singing my freedom in the voice and the tonality at the time that you want, prayer, chanting that's asymmetrical to Anicca Vata Sankara, Upadavaya Dhamino. Okay, I know that you know a few lines of Pali. But what about you in the natural, unspoken, improvised voice of your own vulnerability? I want to know that girl, that boy. And so, in between eating, some boys and girls in the monastery were encouraged to sit on their hands in between mouthfuls of food. Because they're looking around, they're eating with their chopsticks or their hand, and they go back to the meditation hall and sit for 2 hours. And a month goes by, and they do it every year for the next 20 years. That's what they do. But unless you've got a really good Kalyanamitta, someone who is willing to not collude and talk and evolve and shape and, release with you the more beautiful aspects of being, habits also don't just leave when we go into a monastery, they go with us. And eating and talking and the way in which we use our hands to communicate, you need to sometimes sit on them in order to not do something that's so called natural. And eating is one of those things that can either kill you or nurture you or dull you or, whatever you do to dumb out, not dumb down, but just to dumb out. No offense to the food or alcohol, or God forbid you smoke cigarettes, shame on you. Do it mindfully, beautify. I was a great smoker. I often said if I got cancer, I'd start smoking. but do it beautifully, not to shame yourself with the things that you do. When you eat, beautify it. When you don't do it mindfully, you're shaming yourself. That's my experience. It's not like saying I need to overcome a habit, I need to eat less. You're just basically including the word grace and reverence to something so human as nutrient. Go to a refugee camp and see people starving. Interrupt narratives of out of controlness. I've often said one of the greatest teachings I've ever had is the serendipity of finding myself in areas of extreme conflict. I was never a combatant, although I would take up armed resistance. But being in areas of extreme conflict, displaced people, refugee camps, war zones, briefly, they shatter normalcy. And especially around food and medicine, having people protect you and willing to sacrifice their life for your life, willing to give you food when there's no more food to be shared, sharing medicines when there's no more medicines to be shared. Often do 10 years of intensive meditation in 2 days. Deep transformation of behaviors. So when you eat and drink, even if it's alcohol or wine or whatever it might be, how well do we do it? You're not going to be the most attractive date to just pause and someone asks you, what are you doing? I'm practicing mindful eating. So there's appropriateness of our behaviors. You don't necessarily want to do a high dose of ayahuasca in a restaurant. But you could low dose there and mindfully eat and go, wow, man, this is a sacred temple now. This isn't just an Italian restaurant. And all of a sudden, you're that rare individual that goes, eureka, my life is different as a result of me slowing down. And not just eating mindfully, it's what we learn from what we do. I'm going to close here. This is going to be the end of the first session. I don't know what time it is. I cannot say enough about 3 characteristics that define everything. And I'm going to start perhaps with, there's 2 major dimensions. There's concepts, and then there's experiential realities, characteristics of phenomena. Concepts are ideas of phenomena. If you look in Webster's dictionary, concepts are ideas removed from reality that are agreed upon by people that can't be experienced in real time. Borders between Canada and America, the distinction between the Atlantic and the Pacific, they're arbitrary labels placed upon the earth. We know the earth based upon sensations. We know our body based upon sensations. We know the ocean not by the idea of going swimming. There's no way to replace being in the ocean and feeling the warmth. Concepts of life are very different than the reality of life, to state the obvious. Dhamma is about reality. And there are realities that can be discerned. There's what's known as a unique characteristic. When we drink something and it's sweet, we taste something sweet. Sweet, liquid. But we're drinking a glass of wine. But wine is an idea, but we taste it on the tongue and the mind feels it as a sensation. We have a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, a neutral feeling. It's a cognitive experience with form. And concepts are very, very insidious, and it brings up a lot of questions, like Aristotle's analogy of facing the back of the cave and being admired, immersed, enthralled with the shadows, and not really turning around and facing the source of those shadows, the light. The same thing with narrations of thought and concepts. We face the shadow within the word, and words are important, but they're not the experience, and we can't mistake narrations and words for reality. The word itself is a thought stream, and there's content imbued within that thought stream. But to know that we're not our thoughts ultimately, and to shape our thoughts, is a very different dimension of the Dhamma. And the same thing with whatever we're doing to direct experience. Crossing the border between America and Canada, you need a passport. Right now, only essential travelers. But there is no border that can be experienced any more than time. Way back in the 1600s, apparently, in England, there was a calendar reform act in which arbitrarily they took 10 days off the calendar, and apparently one of the first great national protests, we want our 10 days back. There were no days taken. There is no time. It's relative. And the same thing with lots of things that we take for real deep, deep truth. Gender, racism, xenophobia, ethnicities, all these things are relative truth, but Dhamma is about the direct, intimate experience of intercausality that is unique and the same for all living creatures. How do we learn to suffer? And how can we overcome these primordial forms of suffering? Let me pause here. The Buddha used the simile of the arrow. Many of you know it. A person shot with an arrow. It's you, it's me. The Buddha was said to have addressed this man, "Shall I help you and show you how to remove the arrow of dukkha or suffering?" And the man who shot with the arrow, who's suffering, says, "No, I want to know who shot it and why. I want to know who made the wood and what kind of wood, what kind of feathers, and what bird did it come from?" Meanwhile, the man dies, to state the obvious. Historical narratives of why don't often address the reason for. And the issue at hand here is the Buddha addressed, as I understand it in these teachings, as Mahasi passed it on through Dhamma, is the direct experience. That's reality. How do you unknowingly create your own dukkha, Alan Clements? Take it off others. How do you create your own suffering? By not knowing your own mind. U Pandita, the heir of the Mahasi tradition, said, to know your own mind is the most important thing that you can do in your life. Just pause right there. In the absence of knowing your own mind, he would say, look at the world as we see it. Every genocide came from consciousness. Every rape comes from consciousness. Every torture comes from consciousness. To know your own mind is the greatest gift you can give yourself and to the world. To know what you know, and to know what you don't know, and to know how to know what you don't know to those who know how to help you know what you don't know, and to learn that process of knowing. That is Dhamma, to know what you don't know and to learn how you know it. How to know your own greed, anger, and delusion. How do you know your own beauty? That's reality. In the closing here, 3 characteristics, let us not forget them. Anicca, anatta, dukkha. The last couple of months, especially with this medical prognosis that's been delivered, anicca, anatta, and dukkha. It's one thing to be mindful, to meditate, to walk, to be mindful of my wine at night, to my desire for this, to desire to avoid that, but to see and feel and breathe and to oxygenate impermanence. Here, open your mouth. A beautiful metaphorical dose of psilocybin. All of a sudden, an hour's gone by and we're all in that cognitive intimacy together. Okay, you with me? No need to meditate. You did the psilocybin. OMG. I am a frequency wave of particles intersubjecting causal conditions of life without centrality. I'm a vibration hologram. And what is the characteristic, Mr. Clements, of that causal hologram? Anicca. everything is vibration with the characteristic of impermanence. Go there with me. Go there with me. Embody our wisdom. If we knew that everything was, whoa, no home, no house, no mortgage, no planet, no death, no mortality, an evanescent, eternal, infinite configuration of causes and conditions without a permanent subjective awareness of a changing intersubjective world. Anatta, non-centrality. I am speaking, but there's no me. There is you listening and relating, but there is no you. You really mean that the Buddha taught that the emptiness of self was a direct experience that could be discerned? Anicca, oh my God, I'm not going to die. Suffering there is, to quote something attributed to the Buddha, but there is no one who suffers. There's only the experience of conditions that give rise to the idea of an intersubjective cause and a feeling of suffering. But when you're aware of that causal dyad arising, that's so crazy that we're in it, right? It's so wild that we have to experience life. And you go, it's doable. There's a Dhamma to release from the arrow of self-generated, deluded fixation on unreality. Anicca, anatta, and dukkha are what are the opposites of these problems inherent within moha or delusion. Wrong view. If right now we saw that everything was impermanent, who would we be? What would we do? And when would we do it? Whew. And what's the result? And I say this here, let's call it the liberation of freedom. Relative freedom, not deficit, not dysfunction. We're an expanding freedom entity without centrality. The Dhamma is an individual dedicated to freedom of fear and the engagement of higher radiance wisdom. Anicca is the nutrient of wisdom. Whatever we do, wherever we go, however we say it, when we walk, everything, every whisper, every birth, every death, every orbit of the sun and the moon, and every halo and every tear, every whisper, every orgasm, everything and everything that could ever be imagined and dreamed is this ever interrelated field of causality that's a shimmering castle of conditions of anicca. People talk so much about all these insights through the plant medicine, the psychedelics, oneness and wonderment and awe, rah, 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 God, it's awe. But what about the reality of nature? What about tuning into the very being that's in awe is a castle of conditions of change and defined by anatta. Anatta is the most precious, ever so virginal experience in my own life. It really plays right into that place that all that there is Dhamma or adhamma. Either we're awakening or we're contracting or both. And what will we be when we see more intimately that who we define our lives to be is as empty of any hologram as any hologram can be defined. There are conditions. Those conditions can be shaped, but there is no permanent self-entity that is the constant subjective reference to a changing world. The whole notion of permanence, immortality, and soul are just figures of speech within the paradigm here of anicca, anatta, and dukkha. And dukkha, this is it. threefold. Physical pain, bullet wounds, although I've not had one. Car accidents, I've had many. Root canals, dengue fever, COVID. Physical dimensions. Studied torture from political prisoners. It couldn't be more horrific. That realm of dukkha is so agreed upon by all countries, although there are those men and women who inflict it upon others, but they wouldn't want it done to them. Dukkha, it's called. Then there's cognitive dukkha, emotional suffering, the arrow into the heart of consciousness. How many of us have dealt with rejection? Okay? Namaste, right? I honor the God in you, but fuck you. You left me. And I don't like it, and I'm suffering. I'm going to blame you from now until the moon transcends its own radiance. You're evil. You're a sociopath. You're a psychopath. You're a borderline. You're a double psycho. Mental dukkha is, I mean, I've been consumed by addictions at times where I just, never injected. But boy, those pharmaceutical pills, keep them away. Keep them away. Consciousness wants to reform itself constantly, even at its own expense. So mental suffering is, give me physical suffering any day rather than mental suffering, right? And the third suffering, which will illuminate more as the days go on, is what we call, or what's called, the inherent, hear me, the inherent insipidness or dissatisfaction, if you will, of just about everything except unconditional freedom because of impermanence. You can't control it. No matter what I say and do, I cannot stop a meteorite from hitting the earth. I cannot command that whatever the conditions are in this world, that another war doesn't arise. I cannot tell myself to stop aging. I cannot tell myself with any realistic hope, although I'm trying, aneurysm, dilate, go back to normal. Anatta, anicca, therefore emptiness of self, out of controlness, and inherently, lawfully impermanent based upon conditions other than my own control, figuratively speaking. The deepest forms of dukkha, even rapture. Those of you who've developed rapture in meditation, you know that if you attach there, you sink like a rock in water. The attachment is a gravity that congeals it, wants it to sustain, and the very states of mind that were needed to have it arise, that attachment creates its disappearance. If you love me, release me. So that deeper level of dukkha, and it goes into, wow, okay. It's not unconditionality. That's why I use the word, the liberation of freedom, the nibbanification of present time presence in the phenomenology of the senses, in all context, all postures, all times, all states. So today in session 1, we're dealing with world Dharma, the beautification of consciousness, and this will be the end of the morning session from my heart to yours. Thank you for tuning in. I hope to see you in an hour from now from 1 to 3 here in Hawaii, where we'll begin the session and we'll deal with, in my humble way, as much as possible in those 2 hours of the meaning of meditation. And so if you're interested in that, I hope to see you shortly. From my heart to yours. Thank you.